we're not just employees, but we're people too. And so people don't want to just feel like a production unit, that they only hear something good when they've reached their goal or done something, above and beyond. And so our focus really is about authentic appreciation for the person. And that includes productivity, but it goes beyond that too.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the People Hum interview series. I'm Aishwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM, that's specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and channel that receives more than 400,000 visitors a year, and we also publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month. We have with us today Dr. Paul White. Dr. Paul is president at Appreciation at Work, a professional training and coaching institute based out of Kansas. He's a psychologist, speaker, family business coach, and best-selling author. He's written and co-written a total of 4 books, namely The Vibrant Workplace, 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace with Dr. Gary Chapman, Rising Above a Toxic Workplace with Dr. Chapman and Harold Myra, and Sink or Swim with Dr. Chapman and Harold Myra. He's the developer of the Motivating by Appreciation Inventory and the creator of 2 kits, the Appreciation at Work Implementation Kit, as well as the Toxic Workplace Prevention and Repair Kit. He specializes in keynote presentations, leadership training, employee engagement, employee recognition, toxic workplaces, and many more. We're absolutely thrilled to have you speak with us today, Dr. White. Welcome to peopleHum.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. White. So, Dr. White, let's begin a little bit about knowing what you do as the president of Appreciation at Work. I'd love to know about the Appreciation at Work implementation kit, which you are the creator of.
Sure. So it's based out of our book, The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, that I wrote with Dr. Chapman, which is an application of the 5 love languages, which Dr. Chapman wrote. Relates to personal relationships, and that's a sort of a perennial bestseller. He sold 14 million copies of that book, and so I approached him about 10 years ago to see if we could work together applying the concepts to work-based relationships, which we did, and we've done well. We've sold 500,000 books. The average business book sells about 3,000 in its lifetime, so we're pleased with that, and it's in 22 languages. And basically the concept is that not everybody feels appreciated in the same way, and that if you want to be effective in encouraging and supporting your team members, you need to use the language that's important to them. So our online assessment, the Motivating by Appreciation Inventory, assesses each person's way that they like to be shown appreciation, not only the language, but the specific actions. And we can talk some about that. And then I grew up professionally in sort of the nonprofit and social service world, where organizations didn't have a lot of money for training. So I wanted to create a low-cost training kit for organizations and companies to be able to take and implement. And so we did this, and it's a train the trainer model. You go online, and it takes about 3 hours self-paced to go through it. And then it provides videos and a facilitator's guide that helps you be able to take this to different teams and lead them through the process of applying the concepts.
Okay, that sounds really, really interesting. I do think that, appreciation at work is quite underrated, and I think a lot of, leaders out there probably don't really have a framework or a guidance to, how do you go about appreciating employees? What's the right time, or is there even a time, right? So I think that's kind of very interesting in the work that you do.
Yeah, so one of the things as a psychologist, when we focus on behavior change, whether that's individuals or for groups, you have to think about obstacles, right? And because any kind of change requires overcoming some kind of challenge. And busyness is one of the most commonly cited ones by both leaders and team members. And so we basically developed a system, and I think that's why it works well, is that it's not creating another to-do list for people. Rather, it's helping them understand what they can do that they're either already doing but need to do it in a slightly different way, or they're almost doing, and just a little bit of a tweak can make a difference that it's really impactful. And I would say in a lot of business settings and in some cultures that the focus is on, employee recognition, which is a good thing when it's designed well and implemented to recognize people for reaching their goals or, doing something above and beyond. But we really feel like employee recognition, and we know actually from research that it doesn't really fit the need as far as helping individuals feel valued and appreciated. That we're not just people, we're not just employees, but we're people too. And so people don't want to just feel like a production unit, that they only hear something good when they've reached their goal or done something, above and beyond. And so our focus really is about authentic appreciation for the person. And that includes productivity, but it goes beyond that too, because one of the things we know about employee recognition is that it only touches about the top 10 to 15% of a work group. And often it's the same people that keep getting recognized for doing well. And that leaves a big middle group of 50 to 60% who really don't hear much because they, aren't reaching that higher level. And we know that 79% of the people who leave a job voluntarily cite a lack of appreciation as one of the main reasons that they leave. And so you're at risk for losing a good, solid group of your team if you don't pay attention to them and pay, give them appreciation. And so the other part that's misunderstood is that a lot of people that focus on recognition think that appreciation is just about making people feel good, which that's nice and it's good, but actually we have a lot of research, and in the second chapter of my book on the language of appreciation, we cite over 50 research studies that show the business really improves when people feel valued and appreciated. Tardiness goes down, absenteeism goes down, productivity goes up, profitability goes up, customer service ratings goes up. So there's a lot of good practical results when team members really do feel valued and appreciated.
Wow, I think Dr. White, you've busted a lot of myths today. I think that was really insightful. So when you say that, there is a section that's completely, I'd say, neglected because they are not recognized, because they are not top performers. Mm-hmm. So that's where, I think leaders tend to give feedback. And I also think that, there are influencers like Marshall Goldsmith, Gordon Treadgold. They talk a lot about feed forward rather than feedback, right? Which is really that maybe you should not criticize employees, but give them insight into how they can do better. So do you believe in that framework, and how should managers go about that?
Well, I think it's especially true right now in the midst of the COVID pandemic and the impact that's had on the workplace in the States and other places. A lot of people are working from home or remotely, or their work has been impacted. And we actually encourage people to focus less on appreciation. It may sound a little weird given that that's my topic, but really we want them to focus on encouragement and support. And what we found is that the languages and the actions can provide that. It's that appreciation is about the past, and whether that you're giving, corrective feedback or appreciation, it's about something that they've done. Encouragement and support is about what they have to deal with now and in the future. And so a lot of people really need that encouragement. And so whether that's a word of affirmation, which is one of the languages, or quality time, acts of service, they can serve that purpose. And I really think that's the need of the moment. People need support, encouragement. And we've actually created virtual training materials and even our inventory, a remote version for actions that apply in remote settings. And all the things that we're talking about can be looked at our website. It's sort of the mothership of all our materials at appreciationatwork.com. And it's the word at, not the at sign, but appreciationatwork.com.
That's wonderful. I think appreciation at work is a topic that's, I feel like it requires a lot of attention, especially I think now, because everyone's struggling, to kind of recognize each other for support and the good work that they've been doing. And I also think that, since, you've been a psychologist, you're a psychologist, um, there is a lot of difference probably in the way leaders look at, different generations. Do you think that also applies to appreciating employees of a certain generation? For example, millennials want appreciation in a different way than probably Gen Y or Gen X.
Yeah, we actually did a fairly large research project on that, comparing, I think it was about 86,000 people, because we've had 250,000 plus people take our inventory. So we will take subsets and take a look. And we looked at that and compared different generations and how they preferred to be shown appreciation. And one of the main differences we found among younger employees rather than us older boomers and so forth is that peer relationships are really more important than they used to be. I don't know they're more important than the supervisor one, but in the past, in the old days, there was a saying that people don't leave a job, they leave a manager. I think that's less true today than it used to be, because the younger employees are more focused on getting encouragement and supporting one another. And so one of the things that we did along the way a number of years ago was switch the focus just from supervisors and managers to communicate appreciation. Obviously, it's good if they do that, but we now teach team members how to show appreciation and encouragement to one another so that it's a both and. So we felt like it was too much responsibility on the managers and supervisors' shoulders to do it by themselves, but they need to take the lead and help get their team members trained so that they can support one another. So that's a really major difference there.
Wow, that's quite interesting actually. So do you also believe, and touching upon this topic, about how does toxicity really begin? So when we kind of investigate the root cause, often it's all blurred. But do you think that there are certain specific actions or events that trigger employee toxicity and toxicity at workplace?
Absolutely. In fact, the reason I wound up writing and developing materials on toxic workplaces is because as I was going out and speaking and doing training on appreciation, I would have people come up at breaks or afterwards and tell me stories about how nasty their workplace was or what a jerk their boss was. And I thought, there's something here. And so we did some research. We have about, 85,000 people on our newsletter now, and we'll ask polls. And so we asked people to share stories, and we were just sort of overwhelmed. So I followed up and did interviews and so forth, and really found some themes that make a workplace become toxic. One is that they tend to have sick systems, meaning that the lines of communication aren't clear. There's often multiple reporting relationships that makes it sort of unclear for the employee about who they're supposed to talk to about what, or they can then go around somebody that they want to, somebody else that's more likely to say yes. That decisions are made and people don't find out about it until afterwards, and they maybe weren't involved when they should be. So there's sort of a structural component. There's then, in most toxic workplaces, there are toxic leaders, and it's not necessarily at the high level. Lots of times we think, the CEO or the president, but often, there's leaders within the organization, whether they're vice presidents or managers or department supervisors, and they are toxic, and it's not just that they're incompetent, that they don't know what they're doing. It's that they really are sort of bad people, and that they're only focused on themselves and use other people for their benefit, and they take credit for things that other people have done. There's a whole bunch of characteristics that we list in the book that identify a toxic leader. And boy, if you work for one, you have to be careful, because they only care about themselves, and they will use you and sort of toss you away when they're done with you. So you have to be careful about that. And then the third component are dysfunctional colleagues. And these are the people that are very adept at creating conflict between other people. They blame others. They make excuses. They don't take responsibility for their own actions. And they're just tough to work with, and they wind up sort of drawing healthier workers in to sort of rescue them. And it saps the organization of its energy. So if you have the combination of a sick system, a toxic leader, and some dysfunctional colleagues, things aren't going to be going well for you.
Wow, that's definitely quite insightful. But also tell me, Dr. White, if there is a difficult conversation that a leader or a manager must have with their employee when they identify that, probably that person is the cause of the toxicity, how should they go about that? How should they address it?
Well, actually, one of the characteristics of a toxic workplace that is sort of the small starting point is indirect communication. That a person doesn't really say what they mean, and so they sort of hint at it, and you're supposed to pick it up, or they talk to somebody else hoping that they'll talk to the boss or whomever. And so a key aspect, and the problem with that is that it creates, it's tough enough to communicate one-on-one accurately. It's really hard when you have a third person in the middle. And then if the recipient, has a question or whatever, they ask the messenger and they don't know, so it just doesn't go well. So I think the theme and the key is to be direct, to be honest. It doesn't mean you have to be brutal about it, but you don't want to mislead or say something that's not true, because that undermines trust, obviously. So I think part of it is to, and in giving corrective feedback, I mean, the more specific about the behavior, the better, rather than saying, you're not dependable, which is you're attributing that as a character quality to the person. You say, I'm struggling to trust that when I give you a task that you're going to get it done on time, because the last couple of times that I've asked you for reports, I've had to either follow up to make sure they're done or you were late. And so you want to describe a behavior rather than attribute a characteristic to the person.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense. And in your experience, Dr. White, and you've worked with a lot of large clients like Microsoft, L'Oreal, and the likes. Does this system differ from cultures that are more kind of startups, and then you have organizations that are much larger with hundreds of thousands of employees? So sometimes it kind of fades away. You don't have ears to the ground, and you might not even realize that toxicity is spreading. So do you think there is a difference between the two sets, and how can you address toxicity from one versus the other?
Yeah, I would say this both in the area of toxicity, but also in applying the five languages of appreciation and positive kinds of things, that it's about relationships, right? It's about people relating to one another and less about the organization. And so we always focus on sort of not trying to do a top-down implementation in a big organization, but like, for example, Miller Coors, which is a brewery here that's quite big. We started with a small group of leaders, about 35, trained them. They went back to their teams and started to implement the five languages of appreciation. And then people saw it and were interested, wanted to find out about it. We got their HR person trained so that they could go and do training for the teams. And so it just sort of goes viral in more of an organic way rather than sort of organizationally. And I think that's how you have to look at things. We always go in and we want to work with a group, a team. It could be, a department or a division, but not the whole thing, because change happens at the personal, interpersonal one-on-one level, and we want to do that rather than sort of a structural kind of thing, because then it becomes more sort of mechanical. And that's actually one of the problems with employee recognition, that a lot of people say it just doesn't feel very authentic. It feels very disingenuous, because a person's recognizing you that you don't even know, and so it's like, okay, that's fine, but rather than getting some appreciation from someone that you work with directly.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. I think it's very personal and it's something that happens ground up in an ecosystem, because workplaces are ultimately living and breathing ecosystems. So I think, where you kind of are nurturing your employees and your peer groups to appreciate each other constantly. I think that's beautiful. So thank you so much for those lovely insights, Dr. White. And lastly, I'd also want to ask you if you have any other important sound bites that you'd like to leave our audience with.
Well, I think, one thing that we need to remember is that our employees and coworkers are people. And they have lives, and we have lives outside of work. And that if we don't get to know them to some degree at a personal level, it really impacts negatively our ability to work with collaboratively and influence them at work. And I think it's especially true now in sort of the remote working kind of environment, that if all we do is talk about work, then we just feel like a work unit, And so when we work face to face, we have those sort of opportunities to stop by their office and see how they're doing, or we see them in the break room or whatever. When we're working remotely, it doesn't happen. And so we did some research that found out that for remote workers, it's really important to be proactive, to talk about and share about your own personal life, what you did this week and so forth, and that talk about some things personal outside of the group meetings. Otherwise, it feels very sort of objective and clinical, and it's not like you're becoming their best friend or a counselor or anything. It's just that getting to know a little bit about them so that they feel like you value them and are interested in them. So I think treating employees as persons rather than just as work units is critical.
Yes, absolutely. I think I completely agree with you that, we are in a very uncertain condition. And I think sometimes we just get so lost in our work. I think it's important to have those breakout sessions of just getting to know each other, which would sort of really help build that culture of, personalization and positivity. So thank you so much, Dr. White. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for a great learning experience.
You
And I
bet.
wish
My
you all the
pleasure.
best. Take
Thank you. Thank you.